Hi, welcome to Storytime with Dave Booker. Appreciate you being here. Today we're going to continue on with the next chapter in The Sheriff of the Small Town 2, 3, beg your pardon. So, tell you what, let's just get going. This chapter, I will fix this, but the chapter is brothers. Paul was on the phone with his brother. For privacy, he was speaking from a phone booth. Angry as he was, he tried to remain calm. You can't come back here. You shouldn't even be in the state. You come here and they need to know where you're living, and it sure as hell isn't going to be with me. There's a thing called a registry of sexual offenders. Yes, I know it's not nationwide, but there's one here in Ohio. What? I don't know, it started in the 60s, but that isn't important. What is important is that you're not coming back here. Look, if you come back and don't tell the sheriff where you are, you go right back to jail. What the hell do you mean he's got to find you first? They have this town and county sewed up good and tight, and you pissed off enough of the ladies that you're a marked man. One spots you and the word goes immediately to the sheriff. No, I am not going to stick my neck out for you again. That don't mean I got to go to jail again for you. Well, fine, on your own head be it, but you don't come near the co-op or my place. You do, and... Well, I suddenly went dead. Paul was now at odds as to what to do. He headed over to the sheriff's office and hesitated at the door. From the dark shadow showing in the crack under the doorway, Joe saw that someone was outside, but not sure if they should come in. His experience told him that in cases like this, it was usually important for them to come in and tell their tale. Joe paddled up to the door and opened it with words of welcome. Seeing Paul looking almost embarrassed, he welcomed him inside, offered him a cup of coffee, and sat in the desk chair. There we go. To hear anything Paul wanted to say. Paul pulled out a handkerchief, mopped his brow, blew his nose, and wiped his hands. Joe maintained his patient, expectant expression and waited. Deputy, I still do not know where my brother is. I want to make that clear at the start. I just really don't know. That being said, I found a phone number sitting on my desk. Mary had taken a message, and it was just a phone number, nothing else. I called, and it was Pat. He wouldn't tell me where he was, only that he planned on coming back and wanted to know if my spare bedroom was open. I told him emphatically that no, it was not, and that he shouldn't even think about coming back here. Told him about the registry, and he just laughed. I don't think he took it seriously, but I am. I told him if he comes back, he's got to see you, or he's going back to jail. He doesn't seem to believe me. When he hung up on me, I got the feeling he was going to try and come back come hell or high water. I don't want him anywhere near me, so I'm letting you know so as you can keep an eye out. He stood up, looking defiant. I've done my duty by coming here. Whether or not he actually intends to come back, I don't know, but he's stubborn, and he might. If I see him, I'll let you know. Family's family, but blood ain't so thick I want to go back to jail on his account. I've been there once and didn't like it. I'm on the straight and narrow, and you can take that to the bank. He walked to the door and let himself out with a deep breath of a man who did what he needed to despite everything. Joe wrote everything that Paul had said and added his impressions. His personal note read, I believe in his sincerity. The idea of going back to jail really is frightening for him, and if Pat does come back, he'll be sure to tell us so. Put the paper on the desk under a paperweight and sat back waiting for Talbot to come in. Talbot was working the night shift, and Joe would be off in a couple of hours. Checking the facts, it was another listing of people from the local area who had been released from prison. Joe looked it over and filed it in the cabinet, since he hadn't seen anybody on the list that they should be concerned with. When Talbot came in, he handed the paper on Paul's brother and gave him a verbatim account of the interview. I really don't think he knows where his brother is and is genuinely afraid that he might come back into town. I think it's safe to assume that he'll let us know immediately if he does return. Talbot accepted the report and information. Oh, sounds like you're on the ball on this one, Joe shrugged. I know this is important to you and Michaela, so I'm going to give this plenty of attention. Talbot relieved Joe, and before he left, shook his hand in a firm grip. Such was the understanding between these two men that that handshake was told more than words could. It was a bond such as brothers have of looking out for each other's best interests. Talbot decided to take a walk around town. He wasn't going specifically to see if Pat was around, but wouldn't hurt to keep an eye out. Walking up towards the hot dog hut, he was scanning everywhere for one face. Suddenly realized he was doing the town a disservice by focusing on one person instead of keeping an eye ready for anything wrong. That one small change in his thinking brought a change to his expression. From cold and forbidding, his face warmed up, his eyes were friendly, and his posture open. It all happened so automatically he wasn't aware of the change himself. He just became aware that suddenly folks were a lot friendlier. With his previous demeanor, people were almost tiptoed past him, afraid of breaking his thoughts and incurring his wrath. Now they stopped to talk to him, filling him in on the latest goings on and news from outside the town. Little bits of information were always helpful, so they allowed him to put pieces together and get a bigger picture. Some of the information was amusing, such as the fact that two of Cat Charleston's chickens had discovered they could fly and were now roosting in a tree across the street from the house. In Tom's home that the Historical Society took over, they found a stash of very early pornographic engravings from the early 1800s, as well as a large stash of Confederate money in a tin box. Cal Prosper had recently taken a small Chihuahua, who he named Sprout, and bought it an entire cow's leg bone for it to gnaw on. The bone was placed near the fence of his backyard, and the small dog spent his days gnawing on it or guarding it against all comers. Kevin went along to see it and left laughing, considering that the dog would be about 90 before it got through half that bone. The hobos were back and working on the farm, which was good news for plenty of farmers. There had been talk about that the hobos were dying out, and soon there wouldn't be the itinerant laborers that had become friends, and the farmers counted on. Luckily, they still came around and were always ready to get back to work. Talbot made a note to take up some fresh fruit, coffee, and flour for them. He knew from long experience it was appreciated and usually needed. Back at the let me get a drink. Oh, my voice is starting to go again. That's better. Back at the courthouse, he took care of the paperwork Joe had forgotten, or rather, Joe hadn't gotten to yet, and did a sweep and dust from front to back. He changed the sheets on the beds, and even though they hadn't been used, it was a matter of pride that the cells were always squared away. He called Michaela and checked if she and Larry were all right and if they needed anything. Everything at home was fine, and Prince was checking window after window, making sure they were safe. Seems as if he took his job of guarding them very seriously. Talbot thought about seeing if he could borrow the book Rocky had used to train his own dog. He'd seen what the training had accomplished, and about having two trained canines on the job would just be double the help. Driving out, he stopped first at Rocky's place in town. It was just on 5 o'clock, and the place was dark, so he headed out to the snow house. Here was bright and noisy. Bright he expected, but the loud laughter was not so expected. Worried that he was interrupting a party, he almost turned away, but the sight of a row of bicycles made him curious enough to knock. Rocky opened the door with Mary on his hip and welcomed Talbot in. The sight of Talbot in uniform caused some of the 4-H club members to become silent and slightly nervous. What's the sheriff doing here? Rocky led Talbot into the dining room, which was full of people and plenty of food. He explained to the crowd. Agnes invited the 4-H group for a high tea, and it didn't take long for a party to get started. Talbot saw mounds of food from sausage rolls to cream cakes, meat pies to jam tarts, and everything in between. Never heard of a high tea, but anything that had this much food was to his liking. He piled his plate with a little of everything, sat down, and tucked a napkin into the collar of his shirt. Rocky handed Mary to Agnes and went behind Talbot. Gotta make sure your uniform stays neat. He grabbed the ends of the tablecloth and tied them around Talbot's neck. That should keep you looking great. Everyone laughed, even Talbot, but he stopped laughing when he realized the knot was tightly tied. Well, he suddenly shrugged and began to tackle the food on his plate. Rocky went back around and untied the knot to Talbot's relief. The party continued with laughter, talk, and singing until 7 o'clock. When it broke up, Rocky piled bikes and people all over the truck and drove them all home while Talbot stayed, kept Agnes and Mary company. When Rocky came back, it was late. He kicked his shoes up clean at the door and came in stretching. Agnes took Mary up to bed while Rocky made a cup of coffee and sat with Talbot for a while. So, how's things in town? Talbot was going to say things were just fine, but he saw Rocky looking at him close to be able to judge the truth of what he was saying. He really wanted to know. Rock, we got a couple of boneheads out and headed home. All over at the co-op is back. It seems as if his time in jail made him do a 180 turnaround. His brother has been released too, but I don't know if he's coming back to town or not. I told his brother that he's got to report himself to me if he hits town. Rocky's brow shot up, and then he nodded understanding. You putting him on the register? Talbot's eyes narrowed. He's already on the Ohio register. I just want to make sure he's on ours. Rocky fully understood why and what it meant to Talbot. Well, what other steps have you taken? Talbot knew Rocky was checking and would know in a heartbeat if he missed anything. If he had, Rocky would tell him to look down at the problem again. I was going to go all out, but don't talk me down. We'll handle this like any other case, by the book. Well, I'll be keeping an eye out for him, but I'm not going to knock on every door searching for him. Rocky shook his hand. I understand why this is personal for you, Michaela, and I wouldn't even understand if you had gone off the rails a bit. I also trust that your conscience would have kept you from going too far. Two men sat and drank coffee in silence. Talbot rose to head back to the office. Hey, Rock, can I borrow that book you used for Tucker? I think it might be a good idea to train Prince as well. I heard lots of police use boxers too. Rocky dug in a cabinet and pulled out a thick volume. Now, here you go. Training's going to take a lot of effort, but Prince seems pretty darn smart, so it should take you less time than it took with me with Tucker. I'll be in Monday and relieve you. Are you still going to take the week off? Talbot wasn't sure. With Pat possibly on the loose, he wanted to be close. Rocky saw in his eyes the thoughts in his head. Hey, if anything comes up about Pat, I'll call you and let you can come in. Whatever time you spend back on, you can take off once things get cleared back up. That's a promise. Talbot shook his hand and started to leave. Oh, the Bulls are back, so you might want to stop by the camp to say hi. Will do. Rocky closed the door behind Talbot, locked it, and went upstairs to bed. Okay, the next chapter is Trouble in Our Midst, and that's a good chapter. We're gonna wait. That's a long one, so we'll have more time for that one. That is it for today. I'm gonna try and keep these about 15 to half an hour, maybe at the most 45 minutes. But that's it for this one. I am still working on the third book or second book of Soul Man. So hopefully I get that done pretty quick. If you have an idea for a story I could write, let me know. If you have a story and you'd like it read on this channel, let me know. And I would be more than happy to do that. So that's it for today. I guess we're done. I look forward to seeing you again. Today is Friday, so we'll be doing the next reading on Tuesday. And like I said, that's going to be a good one. So, well, they're all good. Be good and be good to yourself. So you have a good day. Bye.